Clara Sanchez never imagined she'd be invited to a luxurious wedding, let alone as the fake wife of an idealistic lawyer. As a cleaning lady, her world had always been simple, far removed from the mansions and extravagant parties of the wealthy people she served. But everything changed when Will Hawthorne, a magnate used to playing with others' lives, decided Clara would be the central piece in his new, cruel game. With the promise of a brief taste of the millionaire lifestyle, Clara agrees to pose as the wife of John Reed, a friend of Will's who believes he can change the world with his altruistic ideas. For Will, it's all just a game to expose John's naivety and have some fun at the expense of those less fortunate. But as Clara steps into this world of wealth and power, she surprises everyone, especially Will, by challenging the rules of the game and turning the tables in a way no one expected. The magnate's plan was about to spiral completely out of control, revealing that not everything can be bought or manipulated. Clara Sanchez stood in the grand penthouse, her heart racing as she meticulously dusted the gleaming surfaces adorned with expensive art. The opulence of the place was overwhelming. The high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking view of the city below, a world far removed from her own. She was used to the hum of her modest apartment, the smell of home-cooked meals, and the laughter of her family. Here everything felt cold and distant, a stark reminder of the wealth that separated her from the lives of those who inhabited spaces like this. As she moved towards the plush couch, she heard the unmistakable sound of a door opening. Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't uncommon for the residents to be away. After all, they led busy lives filled with galas and business meetings. But today was different. She felt a presence behind her, and as she turned slowly, she came face to face with Will Hawthorne. Will stood there, exuding an effortless charm that made Clara's skin prickle. He was tall, with tousled dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore an expensive suit that hugged his athletic frame, a stark contrast to Clara's worn-out uniform. The air between them thickened with an unspoken tension, a clash of worlds that made Clara acutely aware of her own humble status. "Didn't expect to find a cleaning lady in my living room," Will said, his voice dripping with sardonic amusement. "How quaint." Clara felt a rush of indignation. "I'm not just a cleaning lady. I work hard for my family," she replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. "And I'm doing my job if you don't mind." Will stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Oh, I don't mind at all. In fact, it's quite fascinating. The rich and the poor, all sharing the same air. Isn't it poetic?" "Poetic?" Clara scoffed, her defiance rising. "It's a farce. You think your money makes you better than anyone else? It doesn't." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her boldness. "You've got fire, don't you? Most people in your position would just nod and smile, hoping for a tip." Clara crossed her arms, refusing to back down. "I'm not like most people. I have dreams, and I won't let anyone belittle them, especially not someone who's had everything handed to them on a silver platter." Will chuckled, a sound that held both amusement and challenge. "What a delightful little spark you are, Clara. Tell me, what would you do if you had the chance to step out of your world, to play a part in a game far beyond your wildest dreams?" His words hung in the air, and something in Clara's heart skipped a beat. She was used to dreaming, but dreams often felt like distant stars, beautiful yet unreachable. "What do you mean?" she asked, her curiosity piqued despite her better judgment. "I have a proposition for you," Will said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Imagine this. You pretend to be the wife of my idealistic friend, John Reed, at an extravagant wedding in Aspen. John is a brilliant lawyer who believes he can change the world, but he's naive. My friends and I think he could use a dose of reality, and you could be part of that. You'd get to experience a world where dreams are made of silk and champagne." Clara's heart raced, a mix of fear and intrigue coursing through her veins. "And what's in it for you?" "Just a little entertainment," he replied casually, but his eyes sparkled with mischief. And perhaps a lesson for John, who needs to realize that not everything in life can be fixed with idealism. Besides, you'd get a taste of the life you've always admired from afar. For a moment, Clara was torn. It was dangerous, reckless even, but the idea of stepping into a world of elegance and privilege was intoxicating. Yet, she sensed the underlying cruelty in Will's suggestion, a game that could leave her vulnerable. And if I refuse? Will shrugged, a devilish grin playing on his lips. Then you continue cleaning up after the likes of me. But think of it, Clara. This could be your chance to show the world, and yourself, that you're more than just a cleaner. Her mind raced with possibilities, and despite the warning bells ringing in her head, a part of her was drawn to the challenge. Clara took a deep breath, weighing her options. She was not one to shy away from opportunities, even if they came wrapped in danger. I'll think about it, she finally said, her voice steady. Will's smile widened, as if he had already won. That's all I ask. Just think about it. With that, he turned to leave, his presence lingering in the air like a spark. Clara exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling on her. She was on the precipice of a choice that could change everything. Clara stood in the opulent living room of Will's penthouse, her heart racing as she processed the implications of his cruel proposal. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her, the glimmering chandeliers and polished marble seeming to mock her every thought. She could feel her pulse quickening as Will casually leaned against the doorframe, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips, oblivious to the moral turmoil he had just unleashed. Look, Clara, he said, his voice smooth as silk yet laced with condescension. This is your chance to step into a world you've only ever cleaned for. Think of it as an opportunity to play a role, one where you can show everyone, especially John, just how ridiculous this whole idealism thing really is. Clara bristled at the way he spoke about John, as if he were nothing more than a pawn in his elaborate game. You think I'm just going to become part of your little scheme? I'm not a toy for your amusement, Will. Amusement? No, this is about exposing the truth, he replied, his tone shifting slightly into something more serious. John Reed is a good man, too good for this world. He needs a reality check, and you have the perfect background to deliver it. You could be the real-life embodiment of the struggles he claims to care about. Clara clenched her fists, the temptation to lash out at him battling with a nagging curiosity about the life she had always dreamed of. And what do I get out of this? A few hours of pretending. A taste of the life I've always wanted but can never have. Exactly, Will replied, his eyes narrowing. Just a taste, and then you walk away. No strings attached. But imagine the look on John's face when he realizes how naive he's been. As Clara contemplated his words, a part of her recognized the allure of the scenario. The wedding in Aspen, the glamorous lifestyle, and the chance to step outside her mundane existence for just a moment. It was intoxicating. But the moral weight of the situation gnawed at her. She was being asked to deceive someone who, despite Will's cynicism, genuinely believed in making a difference. You're playing a dangerous game, she finally said, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. What if John sees through the facade? What if he gets hurt? Will straightened, his demeanor shifting as he regarded her with a newfound intensity. That's the point, Clara. This isn't about John. It's about shaking things up. The world needs a dose of reality, and you could be the one to deliver it. Besides, you have nothing to lose. Clara faltered, grappling with the conflicting emotions swirling within her. She had always been the one to follow the rules, to stay within the lines defined for her. But here was Will, offering her a chance to step into a role that could redefine her destiny, if only for a fleeting moment. Meanwhile, across town, John Reed was preparing for the wedding, his idealistic spirit shining brighter than the sun. He was the kind of man who believed in the power of change, a man who dedicated his life to social causes and upliftment. Clara had heard of him through the whispers of her affluent clients, each story painting a picture of a man who could change the world. As she imagined his warm smile and passionate speeches, Clara felt a pang of guilt. How could she betray someone who genuinely wanted to make a difference? But then again, how often had she been given a chance to rewrite her own narrative? Just as she was about to voice her concerns, Will interrupted her thoughts. You'll fit in perfectly with John's circle. They won't suspect a thing. You'll be the married woman that everyone admires, the one who understands the struggles of the common folk. It's a win-win. Clara took a deep breath, weighing the choices laid before her. And what about you, Will? What do you gain from this? His smirk returned, but there was something darker beneath it. I gain the satisfaction of watching John squirm, and perhaps a little amusement at your expense. Clara's stomach twisted at the realization of his motives. This was no innocent plan. It was a strategic maneuver intertwined with his own bitterness. She felt a wave of defiance wash over her. I'll do it, she said, her voice firm despite the trepidation within. But remember, I'm not just a pawn in your game. If I'm going to do this, I'll do it on my own terms. Excellent, Will replied, his grin widening. I knew you had fire in you, Clara. Let's see how well you play the role of Mrs. Reed. As she turned to leave, her mind racing with apprehensions and possibilities, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a web of complexities far beyond her understanding. Yet, deep down, she felt a flicker of excitement. This was her chance to claim a piece of the life she had longed for, even if it meant dancing on the edge of danger. As Clara stepped out of the car, the crisp mountain air enveloped her, mingling with the unmistakable scent of pine and luxury. The Aspen Resort loomed before her, a sprawling edifice of glass and stone that sparkled under the afternoon sun, as if trying to impress the very sky above. She swallowed hard, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was a realm she had only ever dreamed of, opulence that danced at the edges of her reality. Welcome to paradise, Will's voice sliced through her thoughts, dripping with sarcasm as he gestured toward the resort. His dark sunglasses perched on his nose, masking the scrutiny behind them. Paradise for some, Clara replied, her tone resolute. She wasn't here to be daunted by the glitz. If anything, she wanted to prove that she belonged, even if it was all a facade. Just remember, you're playing a role, Will reminded her, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. You might want to act a little more wifely. As they entered the lobby, Clara was bombarded by the sights and sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and the subtle hum of wealth. Guests adorned in designer dresses and tailored suits drifted around the space, their conversations punctuated with casual mentions of stock portfolios and philanthropic ventures. Clara felt like a fish out of water, yet she held her head high, determined to navigate this world with poise. Stick close to me, Will said, his tone suddenly serious. You need to know how to play the game. Clara nodded, though she felt a flicker of defiance. She wasn't merely a pawn in his twisted game. She would find a way to make her mark. As they mingled, she felt the curious stares of the guests, their eyes flickering between her and Will, the billionaire with a penchant for risky bets. Who's the new lady? A blonde woman, impeccably dressed, whispered to her companion, her voice laced with intrigue. Clara caught snippets of conversations, noting how quickly rumors spread in this gilded cage. Clara, darling, come here. A voice called out, drawing her attention to a group gathered by the fireplace. John Reed, the idealistic friend Will had intended to humiliate, stood with an inviting smile, his warm brown eyes sparkling with genuine interest. Hi, Clara, he said, his voice smooth and welcoming. I've heard so much about you from Will. Oh, I'm sure it was all glowing praise, she replied, a teasing smile on her face. He seems to be good at that. John chuckled, a sound that made her feel at ease. Let's hope he didn't scare you away with his charm. Don't worry, I'm a tough one, she replied, her heart racing at the chemistry that sparked between them. There was something refreshing about John. His idealism wasn't just a mask, it felt genuine. Clara found herself drawn to him, intrigued by the stark contrast he presented to Will's cynicism. As the evening progressed, Clara found herself engaging with the guests, surprising them with her wit and intelligence. She spoke passionately about her dreams, her family, and the struggles she had faced, her authenticity shining through like a beacon. Laughter mingled with admiration as she captivated her audience, painting a picture of resilience that resonated deeply. "Where did you learn to talk like that?" one guest asked, genuinely impressed. "Life has taught me a thing or two," Clara said, her smile unwavering. Will observed from a distance, his expression shifting from amusement to irritation. He had expected her to falter, to remain in the shadows of his world, but Clara was rising to the occasion. Each moment she shared with John seemed to tighten the invisible strings of his original plan, complicating the cruel game he had set in motion. "Looks like you're quite the charmer yourself," John remarked, stepping closer to Clara as they shared a laugh. "Maybe Will underestimated me," she said softly, glancing over at the billionaire who had orchestrated this entire charade. "Or maybe he just didn't know what I'm capable of." John's brow furrowed slightly as he caught the edge in her tone, sensing the layers of complexity in her circumstances. "What do you mean?" Clara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He sees this as a game, but to me, it's more than that. I have everything to lose." John's expression softened, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I get it. But maybe we can turn this into something more than just a bet." Just then, Will's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. "Clara, time to show them how you can play the role." His words hung heavy with expectation, but Clara stood her ground, her resolve strengthening. "Let's see what happens next," she whispered to John, a spark of defiance igniting within her. In that moment, she realized this was not just a game for her. It was an opportunity to redefine the narrative and challenge the very ideals that sought to confine her. Clara stood in the grand ballroom of the Aspen Resort, the luxurious surroundings feeling both intoxicating and suffocating. Glittering chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a warm glow over the sea of well-dressed guests. She scanned the crowd, her heart racing as she spotted John Reed across the room, looking every bit the idealist in his tailored suit, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. It was time to lay everything on the table. "John," Clara called out, her voice cutting through the chatter. He turned, a smile breaking across his face as he approached her. "Clara, you look stunning," he said, his eyes sparkling with genuine admiration. "Thank you, but I need to talk to you." "It's important," she said, her tone shifting to one of urgency. She led him to a quieter corner, away from the prying eyes of the other guests. "What's going on?" John asked, his brow furrowing slightly. "You seem serious." Clara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I need you to know that Will's plan. It's not just a harmless bet. He's using me to hurt you. He wants to expose your vulnerabilities in front of all these people." John's expression darkened, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "He wants to showcase you as a failure in love, all while pretending to be your devoted wife," she explained, her voice trembling. "I overheard him and his friends discussing it. They think it's all a game." John's jaw clenched as he processed her words. "I knew Will could be cruel, but this is beyond anything I imagined. Why would he want to hurt me like this?" "Because he's cynical and believes that everyone is out for themselves, even you," Clara replied, her heart aching for John. "But I think we can turn the tables on him. If we work together, we can show him that genuine connections matter more than his games." John's gaze softened as he considered her proposal. "You're right. Will has twisted our friendship into something unrecognizable. I've let his cynicism seep into my own beliefs about people. Maybe we can show him that he's wrong." Clara nodded, feeling a spark of hope igniting between them. We can play along with his game, but we'll do it on our terms. We'll make it clear that we're not pawns in his twisted world. A determined glint flashed in John's eyes. I'll confront him. I won't let him walk over me any longer. Clara smiled, feeling a rush of camaraderie. And I'll be right there with you. Together, we can expose his cruelty. As they discussed their strategy, Clara couldn't help but feel a growing bond with John. The weight of their shared mission made her feel lighter, as if the burdens she carried were being shared. John's passion for social causes and his genuine nature were refreshing compared to the coldness she had experienced from Will. Meanwhile, Will watched from a distance, his keen eyes narrowing as he observed Clara and John engaged in deep conversation. A sense of unease washed over him. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. Clara's charm was captivating, and it was evident that John was drawn to her authenticity. Is she really that special? He muttered under his breath, frustration simmering within him. What is it about her that has him so captivated? As the evening wore on, Clara mingled with the guests, her confidence growing as she effortlessly engaged in conversation. She was surprised to find herself enjoying the attention and admiration of those around her. Her authenticity became a breath of fresh air amidst the superficiality that often defined such gatherings. Clara, you really know how to light up a room, one guest remarked, her eyes sparkling with intrigue. Thank you, Clara replied, a smile spreading across her face. I just believe in being true to oneself, no matter where we come from. John watched her from afar, pride swelling within him. He had underestimated her strength and resilience. Clara was more than just a pawn in Will's game. She was a force to be reckoned with. As Clara continued to impress the guests, forging connections and alliances, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would not let Will's cynicism define their friendship. Together with Clara, they would create a narrative that challenged Will's views and turned his cruel game back on him. Let's show him what real connections look like, John murmured to himself, steeling his resolve. With Clara by his side, he felt ready to confront the darkness that Will had cast over their lives. The stakes were rising, and the stage was set for a showdown that would redefine their relationships and challenge the very foundations of their ideals. Clara stood in the grand ballroom, the exquisite decor enveloping her in a world far removed from her humble beginnings. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers reflected off the polished marble floors, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers, mingling with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. She felt a surge of determination coursing through her veins. With John Reed at her side, she was ready to execute their plan. Are you sure about this? John asked, his brow furrowed with concern. His idealistic nature clashed with the deceptive game they were about to play. Clara could see the hesitation in his eyes, the weight of loyalty to Will pressing down on him. Clara placed a reassuring hand on his arm, her resolve firm. We have to do this, John. It's the only way to show them the truth about Will and his games. They need to see beyond the facade. Just then, Richard Ellis, a sharp-dressed man with a glint of mischief in his eyes, approached them. His reputation preceded him. He had been a frequent critic of Will's careless attitude towards the less fortunate. Are you both ready? He asked, a smirk playing on his lips. This wedding could use a little excitement. Clara nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie with Richard. We're going to expose Will for what he is, someone who uses people for his own amusement. Then let's make it memorable, Richard replied, his voice low and conspiratorial. I'll create a distraction. You two just keep your eyes on the prize. As the wedding ceremony began, Clara's heart raced. She stood at the edge of the crowd, the murmurs of the guests washing over her like waves. Will was seated at the front, his expression a mixture of arrogance and amusement. Clara couldn't ignore the way he looked at her, like a puppet master surveying his marionette. The officiant began speaking, But Clara's mind was elsewhere. She caught John's eye across the room. He nodded, signaling that the moment was near. Clara felt a mix of fear and excitement bubbling within her. It was time to change the narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen," Clara's voice rang out, cutting through the chatter. The crowd fell silent, turning to her with curiosity and surprise. "I know I'm not the bride, but I believe I have something important to say." Will's eyes narrowed, and Clara could sense the tension mounting. The guests whispered among themselves, intrigued by her boldness. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "This wedding, this celebration of love and commitment, is beautiful. But it made me reflect on what we often overlook, the real values in life." A ripple of confusion passed through the audience. Clara could see John shifting uncomfortably, but she pressed on. "We often equate success with wealth, power, and status. But what happens when we lose sight of what truly matters? Kindness, compassion, and genuine connections." The crowd shifted, some nodding in agreement, while others looked on in confusion. Clara's gaze locked onto Will, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I stand here today not as a wealthy woman, but as someone who understands the struggles of those who feel invisible in a world obsessed with appearances." She felt a rush of adrenaline as she continued. "I am here because I wanted to show that anyone can play a role in this game of life. But let's not forget the cost of that game. Will, you may think this is all just a bet, a cruel joke, but it's people's lives you're toying with." Gasps echoed through the room, and Clara could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The guests were awakening to the realization that they were part of something deeper, something that transcended the event they were attending. "Today, let us challenge ourselves to look beyond the glitter and glamour," Clara implored, her voice rising with passion. "Let us take a moment to reflect on our values and the impact we have on each other's lives." Will stood, fists clenched at his sides. Clara could see the internal conflict raging within him, and she pressed on. "We can choose to be more than our wealth. We can choose to be a force for good." As she concluded her impassioned speech, the room erupted into murmurs. Clara could see Richard grinning from the sidelines, and John's eyes shone with admiration. But Will's face was a storm of emotions, and the confrontation was inevitable. Clara had laid down the gauntlet, and now it was time for Will to respond. "Clara," he began, his voice low and controlled, but Clara could hear the tremor beneath. "You think you can come in here and turn my friends against me with your little performance?" John stepped forward, his voice steady. "This isn't just a performance, Will. It's a wake-up call. You need to face the consequences of how you treat people." The tension in the air was palpable, and Clara felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She had ignited a fire, and now it was up to Will to either extinguish it or let it burn bright. As Clara stood before the gathered guests, her voice steady and clear, the atmosphere in the grand hall shifted. She could feel the weight of their gazes, a mixture of surprise and intrigue hanging thickly in the air. "We are not defined by our wealth or our titles," she began, her heart pounding in her chest. "True worth comes from our actions and the compassion we show to one another." The guests, adorned in their finest attire, murmured among themselves, their expressions ranging from confusion to admiration. Will, standing off to the side, clenched his jaw. His initial amusement at Clara's audacity began to morph into discomfort. He had intended for this moment to be a spectacle of his own making, a chance to expose John's vulnerabilities through Clara's performance. Instead, Clara was transforming into an unexpected heroine, challenging the very foundation of his cynical worldview. He stepped forward, a scowl etched on his face, determined to regain control. "This is not the time or place for such theatrics," he interjected, his voice sharp and authoritative, as he attempted to redirect the narrative back into his grasp. Clara locked eyes with him, unyielding. "And yet, here we are, Will. You wanted a show, but I refuse to be your pawn. This isn't just a game. These are people's lives we're talking about." Her words hung in the air, potent and raw. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Clara could see John's eyes widen with surprise, and in that moment, she realized that she had crossed a line. Yet, she pressed on, emboldened by the truth that had been simmering within her. Many of us here have struggled, faced challenges that money can't solve. We deserve to be seen, not as trophies to be won or lost, but as individuals with stories and dreams. As Clara's voice resonated with the guests, some began to nod in agreement, the veneer of wealth momentarily stripped away. Will's defenses were faltering, and he could feel the tide turning against him. He took a step back, his mind racing, desperate to maintain his carefully crafted image. "You're only making this worse for yourself, Clara," he warned, but the fire in her eyes only intensified. Then, in a surprising twist, Clara decided it was time to reveal the hidden connection between them, a thread that tied their pasts together. "You think you know pain, Will? You don't know my story," she said, her voice lowering, almost vulnerable. "I came here seeking a better life, just as you did when you lost your father. I fought tooth and nail, just as you did. I know what it's like to feel alone in a crowd, to struggle under the weight of expectations." A hush fell over the room as Clara continued. "Your wealth doesn't shield you from loss. It doesn't protect you from the scars of your past." She could see the flicker of recognition in Will's eyes as she spoke of his father, the man whose shadow loomed large over his life. The memory of that tragic day, the funeral where he had felt so isolated despite being surrounded by so many, began to surface in Will's mind. Clara's words struck a chord, echoing the pain he had buried beneath layers of arrogance and cynicism. "Vulnerability is not a weakness," Clara asserted, her voice gaining strength. "It's what connects us as human beings. It's what allows us to heal." The guests, once captivated by the spectacle of wealth, were now captivated by her honesty. They began to murmur, a wave of empathy washing over them. Will felt the shift within himself as well. The harsh facade he had worn for so long began to crack, revealing the man beneath. The man who had once loved fiercely but had learned to hide behind sarcasm and contempt. He glanced at John, who stood by Clara, radiating support. In that moment, something inside Will clicked. Perhaps it was time to confront the consequences of his actions. As the crowd began to applaud Clara's bravery, Will made a choice. He would no longer be the man who bet on people's lives for his amusement. That afternoon, as Clara and John embarked on a new journey, he resolved to invest in Clara's dream cafe anonymously, hoping to support her vision of community and connection without the taint of his past. In the end, Clara had not only won the game, but she had also unveiled the humanity in a man who had long forgotten it. Together, they symbolized hope and redemption, paving the way for new beginnings that went beyond wealth and privilege. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with your friends and family, and help us spread these amazing stories.